Morning. Thank you, as always, for inviting me. I love this conference. It's really cool. So I'm going to talk to you about Penguin, and then Greg's going to talk about Panda. And I'm actually going to talk about manual link penalties, not just Penguin. I will not have a single picture of a penguin in this presentation. I am so tired of presentations and blog posts with penguins in them. I've done it too. I just think it's been done, so I'm not going to do that. If you have questions, obviously you can ask me during Q&A today, but also you should feel free to just tweet me. It's totally okay. I will answer eventually. If I don't, just tweet me again. And I put all the links up in a link bundle, including a link to the slides and some of the tools I talk about. It's portent.co/playpenguin. So here's my relationship with Penguin. Over the last few years, I should knock wood and say no existing SEO client of Portent ever got penalized, either manually or under Penguin or under Panda. But we did have a lot of people come to us wanting help with Penguin. I'm apparently doing my own audio visual today, so I have to be careful with the mic. So we've done about 15 or 20 penalty recoveries. Actually, I personally have done maybe 10 or 15, both Penguin and manual. But my relationship with Penguin really started the day that Josh Patrice at my office came walking into my office with a look on his face like I immediately assumed either I had a zit on my forehead this big and he drew the short straw to come tell me, or the entire office had spontaneously combusted. And I didn't know which one it was, but it was bad. The look on his face, at home it would have meant someone died. It turned out that what had happened is Portent had been put under manual penalty for link manipulation. Now his reaction and everyone's reaction was to freak out. I burst out laughing. That was the funniest damn thing I had ever heard. Seriously, penalized, Portent. We have been fired by clients because we would not do enough manipulative link acquisition. All right, so this was kind of funny to me. Seriously, it didn't even cross my mind to panic about it. So Josh is looking at me, everyone in the office is looking at me like I'm crazy. What can I say? So I'm going to weave that story through all of this, but I want to start by explaining some of this. How many people here know what Penguin is versus manual link penalties versus, okay, not everybody. There's actually two kinds of link penalties, and people tend to refer to them both as Penguin, and that's incorrect, and it's an important distinction. There is the Penguin penalty, which is algorithmic. It happens automatically, and basically Google comes in and says, we've just taken some random keywords and links and pages, and we've decided that just for these links and pages, we're going to shove you down in the rankings, often to page 6. All right, and Google's just giving you the big flipping the bird at you and saying, too bad. Then there are manual penalties, where Google just incinerates you and you're just gone from the rankings. Poof, which feels way worse. All right, a manual penalty, you disappear, you don't even rank for your own name, your traffic goes like this, and the first thing you want to do is run in panic. I actually prefer manual penalties. If I'm going to be put under penalty, I would much rather be put under a manual penalty. And here's why. It's not because I'm high. Yes, it's legal in Seattle now, but no. It's because you recover much faster from a manual penalty. And you get more traffic back. And here's why. That's not why, although I have asked it many questions, many times. With Penguin, you got to track down every penalized page and keyword, and Google is not going to tell you what it is. So then you go and you clean up the links that you think are causing you problems. And then you pray until the next Penguin algorithm update or until the next refresh. That's all you can do. And if you got it wrong, too bad. Got to wait for the next refresh. It takes a long time. It can be across multiple keywords for different links for different reasons. You're never going to get all the way back. Just forget it. Manual penalties, you just go into your link profile and you just say, you know what, I'm going to disavow everything that looks suspicious. Just dump it all. Get rid of it. Then you submit your request and you say, see, look how innocent and cute I am. You couldn't possibly penalize me. Please put me back. And then you repeat. If it doesn't work once, clean out some more, you submit another request. And then you do it again. It's better if you get it done the first time, but you got a lot more control over this. So Penguin is like cleaning the litter box of the world's most picky, irritating cat. If there is so much as the smallest turd left in there, it is not going to go back in the litter box. It's going to continue crapping all over your house. Manual penalties, you just put all the bad links in, go, and that's it, and you're done. So I prefer manual. It is much, much easier to recover. But you got to understand which penalty you're under, and that takes a little doing. Now, the easiest thing is if you just get the notice in Google Webmaster Tools that says you're under manual penalty. Unfortunately, I would say 90% of the people who have come to us under penalty don't have Google Webmaster Tools set up, which, anyway, it's not a good idea. If you know you're going out and acquiring links and violating Google's rules, make sure you have Google Webmaster Tools set up. If you don't, and you don't have decent analytics, then I like to use SEMrush. SEMrush maintains historical general traffic, and you can't use it for precise traffic measurement, but it's pretty good for tracking changes, relative ups and downs in rankings and in traffic. So for example, that would be a manual penalty. Okay, your website goes off a cliff. That is definitely a manual penalty. That is not a Panda penalty, by the way, unless you are, ehow.com. That is definitely a manual Penguin penalty. That is more like a Penguin penalty for a couple of reasons. First, actually, let me back up. This, even though you can't see it, eventually they get back all their traffic, okay, which is indicative of a manual penalty. This is more indicative of a Penguin penalty, because notice they never fully recover and it takes them a longer time, and they never lose all of their traffic, right? They didn't lose all of it, they just lost some of it. So this kind of dragged out, slow, horrific torture, that's more of a Penguin penalty. Then you can go into SEMrush and look at the positions report, and this will tell you what has happened for all the keywords for which you rank. Again, it is far from perfect, but it's a good relative track. Here's a Penguin penalty, all right? This is eBay, and they lost 2 million of their positions, which when you have, whatever, 6 million, 7 million, okay, they got hit. That was definitely Penguin. This one, someone lost 75% of their positions. That was actually a manual penalty, and I only know that because of the note that they had in Webmaster Tools. But you can tell historically, again, because it climbs almost all the way back up. And what happened for them is they had us submit disavows, and they kept saying, these are perfectly good links, and things like, I paid good money for these links, which I've got some other good quotes that I'll run by you later. But this client did not want to let go. They wanted to hold on to those links. They also said, our competitors have links from these sites, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is a classic manual penalty. Again, traffic drops to nothing, and then a recovery. Again, classic manual, 92% of traffic just gone, and then it goes up again. This one was both. That really sucks when that happens. So I have to admit, I was emailing Matt Cutts on this one because I got kind of annoyed, which, don't do that. Okay, I probably am the one who forced him out on sabbatical, but so this client just gets buried for terrible, horrible linking. And we go in and we do the disavow, and then we get the note saying they are no longer under manual penalty. And then I get a note saying all manual penalties have been removed. And the way they said it, no one usually sends you a note saying all manual penalties have been removed. And I suddenly realized they were under Penguin as well. They have never recovered from that. Never. And we cut their link profile to the bone. I mean, we got rid of everything. It's possible that they did recover and they just didn't get all their traffic back because they had lost so much of their link profile. I saw the links. It's pretty unlikely. But the easiest diagnostic tool is definitely Google Webmaster Tools. You will get a nice note, just like we did. That's great. Just like we did, and you will know right away. So I don't even care if you do it right now. The Wi-Fi is good. Get on your laptops and set up Webmaster Tools right now. Okay? If you don't have it set up, anyone who knows me knows I will say things like this. You are insane. Okay? You are crazy. I have drugs for you. You need to go set up Google Webmaster Tools. You need to do it now. Google will not learn more about you and what you are doing. Google already knows everything about what you are doing. Okay? I'm wearing a watch right now that tells Google what I am doing. If you think setting up on Google Webmaster Tools is going to somehow expose more of your SEO habits, forget it. Get Webmaster Tools set up. So let's say you have been penalized. You're screwed. Your boss is screaming at you. How many people here are in-house? Have any of you ever been penalized? You don't want to raise your hands. Okay. So you know what it's like, right? Your boss comes to you probably freaking out. He or she's just shrieking that all the traffic is gone. Or they don't notice, and then you're in a panic trying to fix it before they do. And if you're an agency, it's the same kind of thing. Or you're thinking about how you try to avoid this kind of penalty. How do I stay out of it? And there are things you can do, and they are basically the same things that you do under a penalty, only less so. So you're going to need a humongous list of all the links that you have, every link that you have anywhere. And the database to start with is Google Webmaster Tools. They have a list of linking domains. That's the place to start. Okay? Then you want to hit all the link analysis tools, so Moz.com, Majestic, Ahrefs. Get lists of links from those as well. And then deduplicate them, and I'll actually tell you a quick tip about that. By merging the lists, and the easiest way to deduplicate is get a tool called Sublime Text, sublimetext.com. I have no commercial connection to them. It's just an awesome tool. And it runs on Mac and PC. You go in, you click unique, and it pulls out all the duplicates. So then you have a link, you have a list of every unique linking domain. Then I use Majestic because I think it's the only tool that will do this for you without API access. I go in and I use their bulk backlink checker, which gets me all this data about every single link. Now, the first time we did a penalty recovery, I was doing it because I wanted to see what it was like, and I thought, I'm just going to go through these links. And then I realized that by the time you're done checking the first 7,500 or so, your eyes are bugging out of your head and you can't really figure out where you're even at. So I started to realize we got to find signals. There's got to be some way to filter that list. And before I get into this, I have to warn you because there's data here, which means there's math. I'm a history major, okay? I went to law school. Until 10 years ago, I could not add. All right, so take this data with a grain of salt. Understand none of this is causal. I am not saying any of this causes the problem. I'm just saying if you see these things, it's a pretty good indication, and I'll show you why. But again, at least so mathematicians don't start slapping me silly when I walk out of here. Understand, I used typical tools that real statisticians probably turn their noses up at. But there's all this fancy shit, and it must mean science. Something cool happened here. I used a tool called BigML to do the analysis. And what I found was ratios are really important. So on Majestic, they have these two numbers, citation flow, which shows authority, and trust flow, which shows the quality of the links pointing at a site. And obviously, these are numbers that they assign using their own formula. But what we found is that the likelihood of us disavowing a domain, because we went back and looked historically, is much higher as the ratio of citation to trust flow goes up, meaning, well, I'll explain what that means in a minute. And then if you look at the ratio of domains to links, the smaller the number, the more likely it is that they had to be disavowed. Why is that? And what are the specific numbers? Well, specific numbers, if the citation to trust flow ratio is 1.5 or more, it's pretty likely something's wrong. If the ratio of linking domains to incoming links is less than 0.09, again, something's probably wrong. And if it's both, I can tell you 99% that is a spammy site. Now, if it's your link profile, you're screwed and you need to fix that. If it's a site that's linking to you, get rid of that link. So here's why. High citation flow and low trust flow means you have lots of crappy links, right? Because you've got a lot of authority, but it's coming from total crap. On the other hand, if you got lots of links and only a few domains, that means you have a ton of site-wide links. Also generally a bad indicator, a bad sign. These are pretty arbitrary if you take them on their own. but they mean something. If it's a .ru domain, actually, it's 99% likely, but I just find that to be a ridiculous rule, so I just didn't give it much. And then if the word directory link or SEO is in there, it's also very likely a spam link. I think that's a terrible rule. I think it's ridiculous, but when you see a domain like this, it's probably spam, okay? This one, probably spam. And then there was one that I looked at, I can't remember, it had something about animals in it, and all I can say is don't click those links, because they're horrifying. Seriously, I'm not kidding. I wasn't thinking and I clicked, just, but you gotta be careful with these rules. This site is totally legit, right? It's called Link Risk. It's a good analysis tool trying to find unnatural links. Link is in the name. LinkedIn has the word link in the URL, so don't rely on those kinds of rules, okay? That's not a good idea. There's other signals that can hurt your site as well. So any anomaly, okay, anything weird that happens, and this turns out to be what got us, what got Portent. Any sudden growth in links. If you hire an agency, ask them how they're going to do it. If you're hiring them to acquire links for you, first of all, don't. But if you're going to hire them to acquire links for you for some reason, again, drugs up here. But if you decide to do it anyway, be very careful with how they acquire the links. Make sure that you're not going to do it all at once. Because any sudden growth in your link profile that's not explainable by something else, like a big hit in the news or something like that, is going to get you in trouble. A site relaunch. This happened actually to Sear Interactive. They did a relaunch and they had a bunch of 301 redirects to an older domain that had spammy links pointing at it. They 301 the old domain and they got penalized. Any weird patterns, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Any obvious link buying, I mean, sometimes it's just so blatant, it's excruciating. Understand that no followed links can still get you a penalty. Got to keep that in mind. All right, I have seen sites get penalized. Again, it's all about the anomaly. They don't necessarily care about the effect as much as they care about what you are doing. And .edus can completely kick your ass. We had a client who went out and hired another agency to do their link building because we wouldn't do the black hat stuff. And understand, I don't think there's anything morally wrong with doing black hat. It's just in their situation, the risk was not worth it. But they went out and did it anyway, and what this company did is they wrote a white paper, they put it on their site, and then they went to 45 different EDUs where they owned pages, and they added a link from those pages back to the white paper. So overnight, 45 new links from EDUs pop up out of nowhere. Guess what? Still gonna get you busted. Keyword stuffing. I love link profiles like this, where 78,000 of your links have that exact phrase in the link text. Okay? Penguin and manual linking, they look for things like this because this is clear evidence of manipulation. You ever here understand what I mean when I say link text? It's the visible text in the link. I love this one. This is actually a company that outranks Portent right now for Seattle SEO. I can't comment. I start swearing. Links from totally irrelevant sites. This is the SEO company. That is a link for people who want to do volunteer work in Australia. I love that. That's so relevant. So if you want to get mad at Google about something, get mad about that kind of stuff, but understand that one of the basic principles of recovering from a penalty is you have to ignore what's happening around you. If you sit around and start getting resentful and protesting and acting that, you know, like this is some kind of conspiracy by Google against SEOs in your business, you will make no progress. If you blog like that, I guarantee you, you will make no progress, particularly on a manual penalty, because they actually do take a look. And understand, when it comes to links, crap is crap, okay? Don't come to me saying, oh, you know, I think this might be okay. If you're using the word might, get rid of it, it's crap. So what happened to us? Why do we get penalized? Well, according to Google, it was because we had 10 of these pointing back at us, maybe 20. Less than 2% of our link profile, where we had posts from way, way back linking back to us that said Seattle Internet Marketing Company in them. I suspect it was actually this. So we had a client, an ex-client, whose site was hacked. And at the bottom of the homepage, we had a little thing saying site by Portent Interactive. Their site went from 10 pages to 60,000 pages in 24 hours. And our link was at the bottom of every single page. Call it, yeah, I am a spammer, okay? I admit it. I am a spammer. I think that is probably what got us burned. We got back into Google in less than 36 hours. Does not happen. So I suspect this was an error, and somebody said, oh, Ian's blogging about this a lot, and like a bajillion people are looking at it. Maybe we should change that. I'm not saying they actually care, but it would have been a little embarrassing for someone on the spam team. The biggest thing you got to be very aware of is that spam tolerance, Google spam tolerance is declining. All right, those numbers I showed you, those numbers are getting smaller and smaller. It used to be that you needed an entire truck full of manure to get busted. 2012. Now, a couple little rabbit turds will probably get you burned. Okay? And yeah, it is completely random. So don't expect that because you have a link profile that feels a certain way, you are invulnerable. Instead, use some common sense. If you're using quotes like this, I can say this one over and over again. I paid good money for these links. If you're saying, wasn't this clever? That was the most brilliant link acquisition strategy I've ever seen. If you think that sending out free samples is a good way to get links that's not buying links, it is buying links. If you say something like this, I suspect that Google is smarter than all of us. There's probably someone at Google who's smarter than each of us. Call me crazy. They spend every single day figuring out how to detect stuff like this. I don't spend every single day trying to figure out how I evade it. So chances are they will figure it out. And this one. Okay, so I have now suffered from this same issue, right? Because I'm looking at competitors who have link profiles that look like that truck full of manure, and they're not getting penalized, right? And we are. So it's very easy to say, well, my competitors did this, why can't I? I'm going to send out a press release with a link in the bottom, and I'm going to send it to 400 press services, and I'll get 400 links right away. Don't do it. It has nothing to do with them, okay? Ignore what is happening around you. This is about you and your site. It is not about justice or injustice. Michael Greywolf likes to say, Google is not the government. This is not a moral thing, all right? It is arbitrary. This is a private company. They can refuse service to any customers that they want, and they reserve the right. Be very careful. And when it comes to link, just understand that crap is crap, okay? You know if you look at a link whether it's crap or not. Don't tell me you don't. And I don't care if you are a business owner who's never done any SEO, professional SEO, whatever. If you look at a link, you're going to be able to tell me that it's crap. It's a little bit about strategies. If you're trying to resolve a penalty, you've got a choice between doing it quickly or trying to preserve every last bit of legitimate link authority. I tend to go for the blowtorch approach when I have clients coming in, because generally for them, the bigger problem, when I walk over here, I start to get feedback, so I'll stay over here. If they come to us with a problem, getting back in the rankings is more important than preserving every last ranking. So we're going to go for the blowtorch. You can go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Pull them out one at a time, pull out many fewer links, preserve more link authority. I totally admit it. You know, I'm sandblasting when some people want to do surgery. Just realize this takes much, much longer. Okay, that is the trade-off. It will take a much longer time. And I've done some testing, and we've done ones where we've tried to conserve every link, and usually you're looking at 14 weeks or so to get back in. If we torch it, we've seen 3 to 4 week recovery times. And the reason is you'll get the rejections back, and every time you do, you have to submit another reconsideration request, and assuming that the spam team isn't just getting sick of you, which is possible, there's still a recycling time. There's a time when they get back around to your reinclusion request. Again, ignore what is happening around you. So some quick takeaways here. This is not about right or wrong. This is about risk management. All right? If you are not an SEO and you are hiring someone, you do not have to know SEO. You have to ask them what they are going to do and how they are going to do it. If you hear the word link and acquisition, you need to ask a lot more about that. How are they going to get links for you? If they say things like, we're going to fix broken incoming links on your site, we're going to find sites that are 301ing to old pages and get them to instead link directly to you. We are going to, I'm trying to think of other good examples. We're going to write great content and put it on your site, although that's hit the point now where it's cliche. Those are okay. If they say things like, we have access to sites where we have a relationship with the webmasters and we get a link to you, run, screaming. okay? That is, unless you've got just a garage full of Viagra you want to sell overnight, you don't care what happens to your site after that, okay? Then it's perfectly reasonable. If you want to avoid penalties, you got to do regular checkups, all right? You got to take a look at your site, periodically look at your link profile. You're going to have to do this. And then you're going to want to weigh risks versus consequences. Again, this is about risk management. Understand the risk may be small. It is hard to get detected, right? It's a big world out there. But the consequences are pretty awful. So saying, we probably won't get caught, great. You want to say that? That's fine. It's like Custer saying, there's only a few of them, okay? You're going to get run over. You're going to get steamrolled. If they catch you, the consequences are so much worse than those 4 extra links or those 10 extra links or that number 2 ranking you got. It is not going to be worth it. 10 years ago, I would have said something completely different, just so you know. But this is the world now. Be very careful about declining spam tolerance. What is okay now may not be okay in another few months, so don't just skirt on the edges of what you think is okay. Come up with something you feel is truly sustainable. And by sustainable, I mean something that does not violate Google's terms of service. Google's terms of service are absurd. Because according to Google's terms of service, if you go and you make a humongous donation to a foundation and they link back to you, that is potentially link acquisition. If you want to pick away at them, that's what it is. But again, pay attention to you, ignore what's going on around you. They're probably not going to penalize you for that. They're going to penalize you if you donate $50 to 200 different foundations and suddenly get 200 links from many, many different nonprofit websites. If you get savaged by feral penguins, really weigh time versus conservation. And I recommend looking more at time than conservation. And don't get cute. Like, you can submit a disavow and then submit another disavow later with a whole bunch of links removed from it so that you get those links back. Do that a little, but be very careful. Don't just, I've seen people do this. They'll submit a complete disavow and then they'll submit one that only has 2 links in it. Come on, okay, there's people looking at this. They're going to understand what's going on. If you want to avoid eye strain, again, domain to incoming link ratio less than 0.09, that's an issue. Citation flow to trust flow of 1.5 or more, that's an issue. These are my numbers, all right, not yours. So just be careful. And just the basic principle, what you can always keep in mind here is high citation flow versus low trust flow is always a problem. Always. It's a bad ratio. Lots of links from very few domains always meet site-wides. And look out for anomalies, all right? Take a look at your anchor text on Majestic SEO, or ask your SEO to do it, or ask your webmaster to do it. If you got something like this and that's not your brand, you've got a problem. And when it comes to links, understand that crap is crap. That is all there is to it. Please don't come to me and try to say this link is okay because. If you have to say it that way, it's probably crap. And always ignore what is happening around you. All right, this is about you and your site getting your business back or keeping yourself in business. It's not about the injustice of it all. And sorry, one side thing. I just had to put that in there. He passed away today, so. That's all I got. Ask me questions at portentint, and that's the link bundle, and I'll answer questions during the Q&A as well.
Thanks very much, Ian. So when did I miss I have a question while you're doing the text switch there. When did I miss the memo that no follow links actually can hurt?
Well, Google's never actually said that. They just say all manipulative links can hurt, right? That's what they always say, all manipulative links. It's all about anomalies. Again, if you get 2,000 no follow links all of a sudden from every site, from every site on the topic, something's wrong. Yeah, you're trying too hard. Exactly. You are trying too hard.
Thanks.
Yep.
So our next speaker, Greg Boser, Foundation Digital is his current company. He's standing right behind me. I could read you his bio, but I just want to say that I'm a fanboy. I admit that I used to download the old Webmaster Radio. He and Todd Friesen were known as the SEO rock stars when I first learned what the word SEO meant. And I remember going on a family trip where I had headphones on and I listened to SEO there were only like 6 or 7 episodes at that time. I had just found them, I was hooked, and I listened to them all on my road. And you made that drive a lot more pleasant. Anyway, tons and tons of experience here.
Is
Sorry,
my mic on? Is it
causing
working?
some penalties.
Can you guys hear me?
Is your mic on? Can you hear?
Oh,
Yes,
I need
it
to make
is.
it a little closer, maybe.
Anyway, he's a speaker at all the events from SMX, PubCon, SES, Affiliate Summit, Web 2.0, SEO Oktoberfest, and Elite Retreat. Please welcome Greg Boser.
Thank you. And this works for this one too, right? This is
In theory.
in theory. All right, here we go. In theory. Okay, so he talked about Penguin. I'm going to talk about Panda, the other evil algorithmic penalty that plagues a lot of sites these days and is hard for people to get their heads around and really understand what it is and really what they need to do. We just had the 4th anniversary of Penguin being released, but I'm a big believer in understanding the history of what happened before because it gives you great perspective when it comes to understanding really how committed Google is to this stuff, what they're trying to do, where they're trying to get to. Because being a good SEO isn't about looking at what's happening today, it's looking about what's going to happen down the road. And you have to be proactive and think 2-3 years out to stay ahead of the curve and keep your site functioning well and doing the stuff. So we're going to go through a little history, and then I'm going to run you through an example of a client of ours and what they've been dealing with so you can kind of get the whole big picture. Back in 2003, 2004, the glory days, we like to call it. I'm old as dirt, so I've been doing SEO since before it had a name. And back in that time, it was fun and exciting and profitable and really cool. And Ray and I were talking last night that we'd be retired owning an island somewhere if we worked harder then because it was really a lot easier. Google was extremely page-centric. The original patent was called PageRank. It wasn't called SiteRank. It was about assessing the relevance of individual pages. So everything was kind of done on a very page level. Linking was everything. He who had the most links won. And that was just one of the early flaws of the early PageRank algorithm. Trickle-down PageRank ruled. And what I mean by that is you could force a lot of links to the top of a site, the home page, and it would flow down like that, all right? Everybody's seen the Champagne Towers. People would focus all their efforts really on getting links to that top glass, and if you poured enough juice into that glass, it would trickle down and power your whole site, and everything ranks hunky-dory. SEO was definitely a volume game for the most part, especially with larger, e-commerce sites. There was less focus on usability and that kind of stuff simply because you could move the needle faster by getting more traffic. The person that cast the largest net caught the most fish. So in this era, we spent a lot of time working with clients figuring out how to crack open databases and get more and more URLs crawled, because the more that were crawled, the more potential you had to rank and the more traffic you had. And then the conversion and doing all that stuff happened once that traffic kind of plateaued. Once you got to where you have what you have, then you'd circle back and start working on improving stuff from that point. Organic quality scoring did not exist. So the key thing I want you to understand, there's a big difference between relevance and quality. Google was good at relevance. The signals they had, links, words on the page, densities, all that kind of stuff. They were very good at identifying stuff that was potentially relevant for what you searched for. This is relevant for red Chevy. But you and I look at it and we know that it's a piece of crap, right? This is also relevant for red Chevy. I look at that and say, that is the kind of red Chevy I want. So that's the contrast on the kind of stuff that would show up in search results. And a lot of people were getting a lot of crappy Chevys to rank, and again, maximizing volume, making lots of money, growing revenue, doing all that kind of stuff, but not real concerned about whether the stuff they ranked gave that impression to the actual user. Other things happening at Google that were important. The supplemental index. Let me grab a little water here. Keep it close. The supplemental index was, we first heard about it, I think, this is my first recollection of it being talked about. The search engines used to battle and argue and have pissing matches over who had the biggest indexes. And they'd publish these stats, and like, mine's bigger than yours. And Danny wrote this post and ran it about the fact that, yeah, Google's bigger because they include their supplemental index, which at the time was duplication. You know, back in the day, they didn't handle crawling parameters very well, so they'd get in these e-commerce sites, they'd get stuck in loop, and they'd index millions of URLs that they're never going to show anybody because they're copies of another thing. When it came time to reporting and pounding their chest about how big they are as a search engine, they would count this data. And that was kind of a false number because it's kind of like not real content. And this was the basic concept of what it was. You have one index, it's the good index that they use to serve the majority of queries. All the other stuff goes into a crappy other basket, and it's the bad stuff. The other thing they started in that time was the quality rater program. This is human reviewed. This is people that actually look at search results and add a human perspective. And this is when Barry Schwartz is great, man. He started going this. I find all the little nuggets. He's always the first on everything. So this is, at the time, the SEO community was freaking out, thinking, and the thought was Google's going to abandon the algorithmic approach, and it's all going to be a bunch of snitches. We're going to have a team of snitches are going to be penalizing sites and banning sites, and it was really crazy and hysterical. 2005 to 2006. Still kind of in the glory years. Things are going good. You're still cracking open big databases. You're still pumping out the volume. We had a separate tool where we would actually get paid to set up subdomains and crawl client sites and then feed related keywords that were crawlable back to the search engines and generate these additional 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 URL indexes that would show up in search results in dry pages. We're still doing that, making good money, everything's hunky-dory. Right around here, Google starts actually identifying supplemental results in the search results and giving you a link so you can see. Everybody came out with little queries, so you could actually now start going, oh my God, I have 100 pages of my 200-page site is in a supplemental index. Google also was swearing up and down that it's not a penalty. This is kind of a semantics thing. If you had content in that index, it definitely wasn't going to rank, so you don't have an opportunity to earn traffic from it. So in a sense, it's somewhat like a penalty. But what they kept saying is that you didn't end up in that index because you got caught doing bad stuff. So it wasn't a penalty from that standpoint. During this time, Google admits that it's actually pretty much driven by lack of page rank. So the idea being, at any given time, your site has a finite amount of juice coming into it. And with that, if you have more content than that juice can power, that's stuff that had some mystical threshold. We don't really know what it was, but if it fell below that, it would fall in there. So it wasn't just duplication and thin content. And what we really found in this time that kind of started opening our eyes to it, we take projects with big brands where we're doing blogs, and we had this one thing where we spent a lot of time and wrote a lot of great original content for this brand new site, and we started pumping it out. And this is not all unique descriptions, titles, real articles, good stuff. And we released it on an editorial schedule and started pumping it out, and every single piece of that great didn't exist anywhere went into the supplemental index. Simply because our content velocity, you hear a lot about link velocity, well, content velocity was an issue because we didn't have enough authority and juice to really support that, so it was instantly not trusted and all went into supplemental index. That was kind of an eye-opener to me because it's like, okay, this is going somewhere that people aren't really sure about. So Google starts actually telling everybody, get more links, go do white hat SEO, your problem really is page rank, get more page rank, which is great. They also announced no follow in 2005, okay? You guys all familiar what no follow is? It was originally this. We want to prevent comment spam. Put this on your blog so when the spammers hit your comments and they leave links in there that we hate, they're not going to count. And that was a major upheaval. But it was a big change point. So now what we know at this point is that we know that supplemental is primarily driven by PageRank or lack thereof. And now with nofollow, when you nofollow a link, you can shift and divert the way PageRank flows. So while Google's telling people to go get more links, the other thing that you could do is leverage the juice you do have better, okay? Now in theory, you should be doing that by re-architecting your site and actually changing the way things are connected. What nofollow allowed was to shortcut that, so sites that really weren't very good could sculpt their juice flow and pass stuff to pages that were in this and get them out of the supplemental index. So we did a lot of that kind of stuff at that time. And that's what happened. Trickle-down link building and sculpting becomes the rage, especially on large branded kind of sites. There were sites during this time, and I'm not going to name names, but very, very big brands that had elaborate no-follow sculpting systems to the point where one major newspaper would change the links on their page every day and drive all the equity to whatever story was hot in the news. So if you go visit that with a little no-follow pink link thing you can put in your browser, it would be different every day. So big sites behind the scene could manually make these changes at a rapid rate and get deep-level content to pop. You know, I'm not going to say who was doing it, but there was a lot of crazy stuff going on like that. 2007, Google stops identifying the supplemental results because people went insane about it. Like, they took out that link. You could no longer easily track it. It still exists. It's in some variation. It's still there. And they really started getting focused on fixing this problem. They also hired this guy. I'm going to talk more about him a little bit later. But there was a big push in hiring new engineers, and machine learning was a big part of what they developed a huge machine learning division at Google. So at this point, now I start thinking, because I think I'm one of the smart ones, is that I know they're tracking percentage of bad versus percentage of good. And during the supplemental index, the key takeaway at this point is the amount of bad that was in that index didn't impact what was left on your site that was considered good. So it impacted you in the sense that you had left pages that could potentially earn you traffic, but it didn't penalize or impact the stuff that was above that page rank threshold. That stuff still ranked. I looked at that and said, there's no way this is not going to, why would you not look at that data at some point and make a judgment about the whole entire site? Just based on the fact that if you're 80% of the stuff you feed me, I mean, just if you think as a search engine, it would irritate me. I got to sift through 80,000 documents to find 1,000 that are good. That's just not scalable. It's not efficient. The web's a big place. So I really got focused on the idea that, hey, this is going to, I just feel like they're going to go down this road, and we started really focusing on that aspect. Other SEOs didn't, man. They kept cranking the long tail. So now with the linking and the sculpting and stuff, the other thing you could do is do extremely exact match long tail phrases, right? In the real world, where there's no SEO, a 4 or 5 letter phrase should not have a page with an exact match title. It's just not how it really works, because it's such random grouping of words that they really shouldn't exist together. Big brands, a lot of them were building these. A lot of times it was powered through search. So the search pages, again, you'd take those related queries, and the site would spit out these pages, and then they would have links to products that related to that. Unique description, exact match title, that long tail stuff was the golden ticket for a lot of people. I used to always say back then, SEOs that spent all their time talking about the long tail did so because they suck. And that's all they could do. And they would forget about the head and the bigger, the more important volume stuff, and they would drive all revenue to sites at a very large level using these techniques. 2008, 2009, we could not get any clients to buy into the fact that this is where it was going, really. When you come in and say, hey, we need to get rid of stuff, the mentality was still bigger's better. That's the way it had always been done. That was always the best return for the investment, especially for companies that had VC backing or any kind of board of directors that every month needed to see a chart with the needle climbing to the right. So it was a tough time trying to convince clients at that time that they really need to start focusing on this stuff. Around that time, all of a sudden, Google changes the way sculpting works. And they introduced what they call evaporation. So this was a little diagram that Matt Cutts put on his site, showing basically how it worked before. So the idea being is if that page on the bottom left had a total PR of 9 and it had the 3 links going out, roughly each link passes 3, so that total amount is divided. So this is what they changed. So in the beginning, that's how you could channel page rank flow, because when you sculpted out the links, when you followed them, the total amount of the page, equity of that page, got transferred to whatever links were left. And that's how you could really drive stuff to deep level pages and get stuff to pop. After they tweaked it and introduced this term of evaporation, basically what they said is, yeah, you can prevent juice from passing to a page, but you don't get to keep it and use it somewhere else. It just goes away when you do that. And my analogy is always like if you go into a vote, you can choose not to punch vote for every person on the ballot, but you can't take those unused votes and vote for somebody else twice, right? That was really the concept. So that kind of changed and really put a tweak to how a lot of this stuff was being done. 2010, Mayday. Mayday was, to me, the baby panda, the beginning of this journey of taking machine learned stuff and applying it. And the interesting thing about Mayday is these little comments right here. Sites are the best match for long tail. That's a subtle little statement, but it's profound in the sense that, like I said, they used to be very page-centric. So a big site with a high volume of crap on it that still had good pages in there somewhere, those good pages would still rank. And the people that manipulated the flow of stuff to make these long-tail, over-optimized exact match pages, they ranked. Now, all of a sudden, they didn't. And Google was replacing those with sites that had more natural-looking long-tail pages that didn't have the exact match titles and all that kind of stuff, and that were coming from sites that had an overall better level of quality on the site as a whole. That was kind of a monumental thing at that time, as far as the writing on the wall aspect of it. And the sites that relied on that sculpting and forcing links at the top level and not paying attention to how links were developing to the content externally took big hits. And those that had spent more time, the handful of clients I did get to buy into my idea of where we should go with this, fared much better during this time. 2011, Satan was born. That's the greatest. I was going to be like Ian and not put any pictures of a panda, and then I found out. I was like, oh my God, I have to use that. Like, that's badass. That's the feeling, that's what everybody felt on February 23rd when they first rolled this out. And here's the father of Satan. Remember that picture I showed you? Okay, so here's how this story goes. This guy I showed you back while I got hired in 2007, machine learning guy, and he was working on the team, and the reason this story goes that it's called Panda is because that's his name, and he's the guy that came up with the breakthrough that allowed them to scale these ideas of machine learning to the point where they could do Panda at the size. Scalability was always the big issue, like how do you do this? Apparently he's the guy, and he used to brag about it on his Google Plus page. That's not there anymore. I don't know if he got in trouble or what happened. But he's one of many people at Google that focus on these concepts. So what that ends up bringing us to is that the concept that it really is like the traditional kind of page rank data that was powering the supplement index, combined now with the input of the data from all those quality raters and all those things that they're clicking and filling out. And that basically means that Google now knows that this is a crappy red Chevy. And they also know that this one's badass. And they can do that now much better because of the input of this human team. So that human team wasn't about snitching and trying to actually manage their business with humans. That's not scalable. That's never going to work. But what it does work is constantly feed them with data that they use machines to analyze that data and find out the commonality. All that stuff Ian was talking about the profiles of what bad links look like and what good links look like. When you get a steady flow of sites coming in and the human said, we didn't like this and here's why, now they can look at the root level stuff and really see what all that has in common and start creating algorithms that can identify that stuff. And that's monumental, really, in the scope of all this. So now I'm going to take a quick look at a client that I've talked to a couple of times over this time period and show you how things can go bad. And here, the interesting thing about Penguin versus Panda is that for the most part, Penguin usually has a lot more intent in it. I don't start to cross too many situations where somebody hits with a Penguin filter who wasn't out building shady links, right? There was more. Panda, on the other hand, can often happen simply because of poor architectural planning or not thinking ahead or not letting go of that mindset that bigger's better, not really an intent to go out and spam and cheat and be evil in Google's eyes. So it's important to understand it. So this is a client that what their growth looked like early on. You know, they probably started around 2007, 2008. Startup, they got some funding money. They focused on the small business unit. They had a little sharing component where users could upload content that was pretty cool. They had a large curated document set of really good stuff that made, and when you go to the site in the front, you're like, wow, this is a great site. There's nothing about it that looks terrible. So that's up to 2010. There's Mayday. They took a hit. They definitely took a hit. But during that time period, it was still stuff that you could kind of tweak your way out of. They have a great dev team and engineering team, and sites like this often, in addition to maybe being too aggressive, they all have technical problems where things like they accidentally allow the staging server to get crawled, right? So there's a lot of stuff, what I call tweaking, that they were able to work on. And as you can see, it starts climbing back up. They didn't get hit directly on the very first Panda that came out, but right after that, things changed pretty dramatically. And here we are now, and then there's this long period of stretch, and over this time, Google released all kinds of updates and tweaks to Panda, way more than they've ever done with Penguin. So if you go to like, the Moz site has a great, and I'll tell you from this historical perspective, I'm old as dirt and I don't remember stuff. Rand has a great algorithmic history page on the Moz site that catalogs all this kind of stuff, when it all happened, it's very useful to go back and just read through if you want to kind of geek out on this kind of stuff. But really not much going on there. So somewhere around October of, 2011 or so, they asked me to come in and take a look at it. I looked at everything that was going on. I'm like, oh my God, this is not sustainable. You have to change your model, right? And that's a very hard pill to swallow. This is not a tweak your way out of it kind of thing. They didn't really listen to me. They stayed focused. They were diligent about cleaning up, doing the tweaking stuff. So they didn't just throw their hands up in the air and say, or stick their head in the sand and say, we don't think it's going to happen. But that's where they put all their efforts in. Fast forward a little bit. When the 20th tweak got released, they came back. Some of that tweaking paid off. And by the tail end there, I looked like an idiot. Because I said they wouldn't come back, and they did, and they're happy. And then right about here, I look like a genius again. Because the next iterations of Panda came out, and they were kind of right back where they started. And I will tell you, at the tail end of that last little peak, this site got acquired for $40 million by a big brand who now owns it. And now it's gone bad. So there's a lot of issues here. And so this is the final shot of that whole time frame, and I just want to point out that after all these years of time invested, they're not only right back where they started, they're right back with a bounce rate that's 3.5 times higher than it was, because now the traffic they get is so poor quality, they're surviving completely on image search. So one little tip is that none of this Panda quality stuff impacts image search whatsoever. if you have good images on those crap pages, and the queries show the image carousel, so they get almost all their traffic now through people that click through that and then click that link that says visit page when they're viewing the image related to these pages. And it's predominantly foreign traffic. It's hanging on by a thread. Very painful to see. So here's what was going on. They made some bad decisions, and the content volume just got out of control. Ironically enough, the real catalyst in all this is that they became partners with Google on an AdSense program that Google was doing with big sites. So they were a master account, and basically what that means, the users that were creating content on the site that originally was probably pretty good could sign up and do a revenue split with this site for revenue generated on ads on the content that they uploaded, right? That encouraged, well, they didn't really foresee what that was going to do. And basically, you can see their link trajectory in the first little bit of time. You know, they launch, they get great press, people are liking their stuff, there's a lot of link velocity going on there for a while, but the rate of their pages, the growth of the site so dramatically outpaced that equity, it got crazy. And then, it turns out that if you're an AdSense spammer and AdSense banned you, you could get back in the program by signing up under this partnership thing. So all those spammers in the world were out talking about this stuff. Here's where you need to go. Like if you got banned, go here, and then you can get an account. And once you have that ID, you can go use that everywhere else, and you're good to go, right? It was like a bad little loophole that nobody thought about or was aware of. This is the kind of stuff that started showing up. Ads, spun content, spammers, man, when they get fired up, it's crazy. Stuff like this. Oh, this is just for the Viagra. Now, I recently came back, and because now they're back in trouble, and we resumed this conversation, they've gotten this number down to about 100,000. However, sat down one night and I ran the top 100 pharmaceuticals through and did site queries just to add up the total. 3.9 million URLs on the site right now related to pharma. Now, some of those might be data sheets and stuff that is legit, but that's a ridiculously huge number of stuff that is like this, right? And they just didn't really foresee this, and so they didn't have a back-end system to properly police and manage this. So from where they're sitting, it was very hard for them to tell what's coming in that's good, what's coming in that's not, because they chased the monetization before they really thought it out. But it gets worse, right? It always gets worse. And this is a key thing, you know. One of the things Ian was talking about is a lot of times you can get both manual and algorithmic. So in April of 2012, when Google released Penguin, we saw some people that took a big hit and they got a notice all at the same time. So my theory being is the algorithm thing has thresholds that will trigger that. I think there's a mechanism where they review the data of what got tripped and then they look into stuff that is way over the line, and then that stuff then gets a manual penalty on top of that. So the only areas I kind of disagree with Ian is like I prefer the algorithmic stuff, not Penguin because they don't refresh it very often, so there is that long wait, but I like to never be in front of a human. Because once a human's looking at it, you're screwed, right? Because then they find stuff that, well, the algorithm didn't catch this, but that's crap too, that's got to go, and it just can spiral out into a mess. But so those AdSense spammer guys, after they'd built the pages, what did they do? Well, they went out and got spammy links pointing back to the page because this is what's called parasite SEO. It was a big rage and all that time. Basically, Google clamped down on the cheesy hyphenated domain name. Spammers went out and started occupying space on other more authoritative sites and driving and earning revenue that way. They also uploaded a lot of content that didn't belong to them. So now the site regularly gets DMCA notifications. Google has a separate penalty, a thing called pirate. I don't believe at this time that they're at the threshold that is an impact, but they spent a lot of time doing that just for sites that constantly, and so that could be at play here. So now we have potentially, they very well could be partially penalized by Penguin for the links, the crappy links, and Panda, and who knows where this goes. And they are now getting manual penalty notifications for the user-generated spam. When you see this, the part you always need to pay, there may be, the examples they give you are rarely it, or it's the tip of the iceberg. So don't think if you get one of these that you got it because they really found one or two spammy pages. Not the case. If you get one of these, there is a volume problem on your site and you need to go find it and fix it. So, I'm really big on proactively monitoring content performance. And the cool thing is I use all the same tools that Ian does, so this will make a lot of sense. Here's the first one that he didn't mention. If you have a large site, Deep Crawl, in my opinion, is the best crawling tool out there. It's not particularly cheap, but it can do very, very large-scale stuff, and it does things like tracks all that tweaking stuff, like thin content, low HTML to code ratio kind of stuff. You can also connect, if you have analytics, you can connect your analytics, so you can do a front-side crawl, and then they'll take all the URLs you found, and they'll suck out your organic traffic URLs and show you, here's all the URLs we crawled to your site that we can't find any organic visitor data on, and here's the ones that you did. So it becomes very quickly on a large thing to be able to isolate your good content from the bad content. Then you can start looking at ways to filter and tweak that. And they also do you can compare crawl to crawl. So this is great. Like when the dev teams undo something and they lie about it, I can catch them because when I recrawl it again, it'll say, last time, you had this many errors, now you have this. I can tell when they flip switch back and bust people. Great tool. SEMrush, again, the data in there, it's not as good as your own analytic data as far as actual traffic, but it's a great way. They crawl millions and millions of keywords, and they historically track what ranks where. So getting an idea of what your visibility is for keyword sets over time is great, and we use that one a lot. And Majestic, because I'm a big fan of the trust flow, citation flow thing. I think they're the two best metrics out there. And here's how we use that. So I do something similar, and it is, again, about, I can't stress what Ian said much about sites that have higher citation flow. Citation is the volume number. When you look at backlink profiles of what we know Google is good, trust is always equal or greater than on the good links. You can tell the shitty links because they have super high, because you can fake citation. You can go out and build your own links on networks that you own. You can drive volume to a page, but if those pages aren't linked high up the food chain to respectable sites, you don't develop the trust flow. So that's a huge thing. So we take those two metrics, and then what we do is we just tweak it a little bit so I can turn it into one metric that makes it easier for me to look at stuff that favors that trust flow. So now I can resort data by our metric that uses those two and see things. And it's really quite simple. We basically just average the two numbers, and then we multiply that by dividing the citation flow into the trust flow and taking that number and multiply. So that will adjust the score up or down depending on if the trust flow is positive, that's going to be a 1 point, it's going to be higher, and that score will climb. And if the trust flow, so it automatically seeds that out. And then we can take that data and we can sort on very large scale stuff. We use this for disavowing domains at the domain level. We run the scoring on that, and we can see like where the crap starts, and we take that threshold and say, okay, any domain that scored under this level goes in the file. Really quickly, kind of easy way to do it. You need to do this for your data and your competitors. And this is, so here's the client. Here's giving a perspective of what this looks like. Can't show you the actual sites because that'd be bad. 39 million URLs indexed in Google. And these are the index counts of the other 9 that we consider the competitors in the space that we used to be in and want to be in. That's an astronomically large difference. Here's what that indexation versus page 1 search volume looks like. SEMrush will give you that. It is Google numbers. It's not a real accurate thing of actual traffic. But in a global thing like this, it works great. So that number 1 site has over 2.5 million in monthly search volume off of 6,000 URLs. Our client site, right? You can't get crappier than that. Like, that is just horrendous. So to make the case internally, we do stuff like this. Now, this is what the index URLs distribution looks like without our client in this graph. And the reason the client's not in the graph is because when you put him in the graph, you can't see anybody else because the distance is so dramatically out of whack that it's just, these simple little charts make a difference in arguing your case. This is what it looks like in page one. So on the flip side, nobody else can be on the chart with him when you compare how many URLs are indexed, but when you look at it, they don't show up at all. Huge problem. So now we take that score I calculated, and we take all the URLs out of SEMrush that we know rank on page one, we filter out all the duplicates, dump it all into Majestic's bulk backlink checker, and we calculate that score, and now we can take all those pages and we can see how stuff flows. And the nice thing about this, it really incorporates, if you have bad links pointing to you, then that will be, so we do it on the URLs of the site, we don't pull it on all the individual links, because it pans out just the same. This also, however, calculates how stuff flows within the site itself, so it's a good metric. Then you can make charts like this. This is what their juice distribution looks like across, I cap it at 1,000 URLs, but what we're looking for is how even it is and what level it is when I get to 1,000. That means they have way more pages beyond that and it's still trailing down. That's a great looking graph. That's a pretty good looking graph. So is that one, so is that one, that one, not so good, right? So, what do they need to do to fix it? It's a change in model. It really is not something that happens just with a little thing here. They got to kill that. They've already done this. That's a given. You can keep cleaning up and tweaking stuff after the fact, but if the main problem, it just keeps coming back, and that was that cycles. When they'd show some recovery, they would clean up, but they never fixed the fundamental problem, so it keeps returning. You need to get all the UGC separated from the premium content, because that content just will never see the light of day, and it's really good stuff. Keep that content on the www. There is equity to that domain, so you move all the UGC to a subdomain, call it UGC dot whatever. Make sure that gets assessed separately. You have to purge, you have to delete stuff. Problems at this level cannot be fixed with robots, text, or no index, because they still know you're a crappy site. I'm a firm believer at this level, you actually have to delete and remove, kill pages, kill users, and implement new controls that as new user stuff get indexed, by default it's no index, and then it earns its way into the index over time, so you can meter the growth once you've trimmed it back down to a manageable amount. And get back to building linking. In 2012, they did a lot of content marketing to that, and they didn't get any results because it's buried in all this, but it was great stuff, and they built some good links, and they need to get back to that once they have their good stuff trimmed down to a more manageable size. And final thoughts. Get the copy of that quality guidelines document and read it, and start applying it to your site and look at it. If you Google that, you can find it gets leaked. There's copies on the web. Panda isn't going away. It's getting smarter, and there are no quick fixes, and you have to change the way you think about content deployment from now, here on, ever after. And that's it. My 100th slide, I'm done.
Thanks very much, Greg. We still do have 5 minutes left in this session, so if those of you that are in lunch line, if you could keep it down a minute. We have Ben and Max. Ben, where are you with mics? Ben and Max should be up here with microphones. If anyone has a question, raise your hand.
See, it's easy. We killed the Q&A.
Going once. All right. Well, oh, there's one way in the back. Do you have a microphone back there yet? Ben or Max, are you here? Well, oh, and there it is. There's the mic. Go ahead and ask a question. And while it's on its way there, I want to remind everyone that the password and information on where to get everyone's slides are at the bottom of the agenda, but the slides aren't there yet because the slides are still in some speakers' pockets. So don't go there now and start complaining. Wait till tonight or tomorrow. Is the mic there?
Yes, hey. How's it going, Greg? And Ian. I actually had a question about trust flow, the Majestic number. So,
On.
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So let me first caveat this. We have been looking at Moz Trust, which is like a similar kind of thing, and feeling like it's not as good as it used to be. Like Google's gotten way more advanced in what they're doing with trust, and so like distance from trusted source is not all that great. And so we looked at Moz Trust, we looked at Majestic Trust Flow, and we were feeling like both numbers were not that great anymore. But you mentioned that you found it super useful, and so I'm curious, like, what?
Yeah, it just, well, and before I start, I will say, Rand, that I tried to show how to do this with your tool,
Yeah.
but I can only get to your data through API stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I couldn't really, I would say, the way, I take it somewhat with a grain of salt, but when I visually check how it sorts out, and you look at the sites and where the spam, it looks so accurate, and like if I gave you the list with no scoring, I said rank these, and you just went and visited them, it lines
It would give
up
you
and-
the same distribution. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
That-
Cool.
So, I don't put a billion things into it, but being able to quantify that
But you're
overall-
finding value from it still.
Yes.
Yeah. Ian, are you guys using it as well?
Is this thing on? Yeah. We're using both.
Okay.
And we take a pretty broad approach, so we've got to see a big ratio, a really bad ratio of citation to trust on whichever system we're using, because we know it's very hard to measure that.
Yeah.
I've occasionally preferred Majestic over Moz only because Majestic is a 0 to
100
scale.
versus 1 to,
So
yeah.
sometimes the math is a little bit easier, but that's really the only differentiator for us.
And Greg, that's sort of what you were showing, the ratio being
Yes.
more valuable
Yeah.
than the raw score.
I would like to see you bring that back out and make it a 1 to 100 score.
Yeah, when you had the 100 number, that was awesome.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
All right, well, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank our speakers.